GAFA has already conquered the world. Toshio Okada exposes their terrifying true nature. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, these four companies are now quietly controlling the daily lives of billions. They don't force you. They simply offer convenience. But behind the scenes, a system for funneling the world's wealth to a select few has been perfected. Facebook's market cap per employee is 100 times that of General Motors. They extract wealth without creating jobs. Amazon's Jeff Bezos supports universal basic income. Because the warehouses have been robotized, human workers are no longer needed. GAFA pays no taxes, yet keeps citizens alive on taxes paid by other companies and individuals, then has those citizens shop on Amazon. This is the true face of the New World domination. What is the fate of GAFA as told by Toshio Okada, and what choices should we make? Watch the rest now.
They're not trying to force us to use it. They're not even trying to sell it to us. They make us feel, in the most elegant and smart way, that we ourselves want to use it. While in reality, they are gradually taking control of us. Are you all aware of this? That's the kind of book it is. Taking control. Actually, the control is already complete. For example, when we talk about a large corporation controlling people, Toyota City in Aichi Prefecture was often called a city controlled by Toyota Motor Corporation. That's how it was written in weekly magazines back in the day. These days, you never see that in magazines anymore. Nayagawa City in Osaka Prefecture was called a city controlled by Panasonic. That's what I used to see in magazines as a kid. That's how it was described. But the way GAFA controls things is completely different. Far beyond Toyota or Panasonic. Since the Industrial Revolution, there have always been giant corporations that generated enormous profits. Cities that served as their castle towns were said to be controlled by these companies. But those giant corporations, DuPont or whoever you want to name, created employment in proportion to their power. In other words, they generated jobs, paid workers money. But GAFA is the exact opposite. Look at this. This is the chart on page 22, showing billions of people conveniently using GAFA's products and services. Yet the number of people actually gaining economic benefit is infuriatingly small. General Motors' market cap per employee is about $230,000. You might think that's impressive, but Facebook's is $20.5 million per employee. That's about 100 times the value of GM, the iconic company of the last century. 100 times. And yet, Facebook has fewer than 20,000 employees. Just think about that. Generating the economic value of an entire developed nation. In other words, in the era when General Motors employed 210,000 people to earn $230,000 per employee, Facebook, with about 17,000 employees, generates about 100 times the market cap. What does that even mean? Not revenue, market cap. What does that mean? Giant corporations have long been said to control the world. But these giant corporations, keiretsu groups and all, generated that much employment. So in the end, you could argue they were actually useful to people. In contrast, all four GAFA companies employ frighteningly few people, while generating frightening revenue and market cap. How is this imbalance even possible? You know, I found something similar to this. There's a manga called Ono No. 6. Back in 1967. It was serialized in Monday Shonen Sunday by Satoru Ozawa. It features a secret society called Max aiming for world domination. There's a scene where Max leader gives a speech to new executives. Right here. Max can now move 1/80th of the world's currency. This economic power is second only to the two superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union. But both the US and Soviet Union have 200 to 300 million citizens depending on that economic power. Therefore, both nations require enormous budgets. The population Max must support is less than 1/100th of either nation. Therefore, Max's economic power is the greatest in the world. Amazing. This was serialized in Shonen Sunday in 1967. Quite a remarkable manga. And of course, as those who know it know, it's the origin of Gargoyle from Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. Neo Atlantis. The group Neo Atlantis and Gargoyle. Why do they use submarines to destroy other ships? Because by destroying trade routes, they aim for economic domination. So the claim of controlling 1/80th of the world economy appears in that speech seen as the source material. You can see the connection, right? But Mac's leader's speech continues. Just this first panel is enough. Max can now do anything on this earth. Meaning, despite having enormous economic power, their population is very small, which means they have unlimited free capital to use. In fact, over 10 countries can no longer function without our assistance. And over 30 countries have already introduced max capital. It's truly hard to believe this is a manga from 1967, over 50 years ago. Aren't Max, plotting world domination, and GAFA essentially the same? The difference is that Max uses illegal weapons to destroy ships and severs trade routes to control countries dependent on trade. But even that is the same as what China, Russia, and the US are doing or have done. The British Empire, France, Spain, they all issued licenses to pirates for plunder, which is exactly the same thing. So is what Max is doing really evil? It's exactly the same as what former colonial powers did. And furthermore, Max similarly doesn't distribute its profits to the masses. They don't hire people. The workers they do hire are extremely few. And on top of that, the 4 GAFA companies don't even pay taxes. So their profits don't get distributed to the weak. They could truly be called enemies of democracy. And that's what makes GAFA interesting, precisely because they're enemies of democracy. Intellectual elites who have given up on democracy support them. Intellectual elites who have given up on democracy. Who specifically are we talking about? People like Horiman or Zozatown's Shintaro Tabata. Those kinds of people. Those people support them. For those people, trusting in the democratic system and having successful people and companies pay taxes to the government, only for that money to be wasted by incompetent government bureaucrats. If that's what's going to happen, then Amazon investing it in R&D is better. That's their argument. A lot of people agree when they look at Facebook and companies like that. Those who agree tend to be mostly smart people. In other words, openly criticizing the democratic system has become something nobody even bothers to rebut anymore. So GAFA's tax avoidance is criticized by some. But many have given up on the nation-state system and are starting to think that corporations should take over the role of the state. And the number of such people is increasing considerably. Not just GAFA, IT companies in general tend to be this way, where a small elite of talent, smartly and coolly, without getting their hands dirty, amasses enormous wealth. But behind that, of course, a large portion of small and medium businesses and entrepreneurs competing with GAFA and IT companies go bankrupt. And unemployment rises. The unemployed increase. Since they don't hire many people, the middle class hollows out. The middle class, what we used to have plenty of in Japan, people with a decent income, a decent annual salary, who could live on pension after working until retirement, who had dissatisfactions in life but not much anxiety. Those people. That's what we call the middle class, who could send their kids to college if they wanted to. Those ordinary households disappear, hollow out, and the wealth gap only keeps expanding. So how do you plan to make money? Is Amazon stupid? Good question. Amazon is not stupid. In fact, Jeff Bezos made an interesting statement at an environmental forum. Oh, I flipped it upside down again. So, I actually hadn't quite noticed this until I read this book. I thought, really? Here's a summary of Jeff Bezos' speech at the Environmental Forum. The government should consider a minimum income guarantee system, or through a negative income tax, distribute cash above the poverty line to all citizens. In other words, universal basic income. This speech, on the surface, Bezos was praised as a champion of the week through this speech. But the author Scott Galloway says, before praising that, think about why there are so few images of Amazon's warehouses. That's what he says. Photos and videos of Amazon warehouses do appear sometimes, but only the convenient ones provided by Amazon. Only the favorable ones make it out. For example, we hear that Amazon warehouse workers are exploited. Everyone working brutal 10-hour shifts. We hear things like that, but Galloway says that's already a thing of the past. That's ancient history. Today's Amazon warehouses in America don't have that many exploited workers. They operate unmanned, with only robots. For that purpose, Amazon has been paying huge sums to robotic warehouse management companies over the past few years, and buying those companies outright. And this isn't just Amazon, Uniqlo's warehouses too were robotized last year, reducing warehouse workers by 90%. In Uniqlo's case, those 90% were reassigned elsewhere. That's the typical Japanese management style. Amazon, of course, does no such thing. What Bezos is saying essentially comes down to this. We no longer need human workers in Amazon warehouses. So we have no money to pay them. But we need people to buy things, otherwise Amazon is in trouble. So have the government give them money as universal basic income. But the government. How do you expect the government to pay? Amazon doesn't pay taxes. We legally minimize our taxes, we pay almost nothing to the US government. So the basic income the US government would pay them, the money to guarantee their minimum livelihood, would be funded by taxes collected from individuals and companies other than Amazon. Incredible, isn't it? It's brutal. Smart or brutal. Bezos' reason for supporting basic income. His reasoning, as I explained, is that maintaining the middle class has become obviously impossible. So Amazon dreams of a world where taxes paid by companies other than Amazon are used to give citizens money to shop on Amazon. That's their vision. A true world government. As I mentioned, Horiman and others say, rather than giving taxes to the Japanese government, let Amazon profit, they'll invest it in basic research. On top of that, young people are generating ideas. And if they build a company with a great idea, Amazon will buy it. So we benefit from that. That's their argument. But we hear, within this frame of thinking, most people don't quite fit in. It's too convincing. For now, there's some truth in what Horiman says. But fundamentally, the nation-state is losing. And GAFA represents a society that keeps winning. And that era has already arrived. I'd like to hear more about GAFA. GAFA is incredible. I'm starting to feel like fixing anything is pointless. GAFA is incredible. I feel like there's no way to beat them. So right now in America, a way of life that rejects Amazon and the four GAFA companies is emerging. About this lifestyle that rejects GAFA, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and the others. Let's talk about that another time. That's all for Chapter 2, and before moving on to Chapter 3, that's where I'll end today's free portion.